Welcome to today's podcast. In this podcast, I'll be doing a little feature on a short nonfiction narrative about my life, as well as presenting a business plan to address a problem in America and present a solution to it. So now for my short personal narrative. I'll just get straight into it. It'll be about my childhood and my early life in college. As a young child and a kid growing up, I would say that my life was quite privileged compared to most. I grew up in a very comfortable environment and always had more than I needed. Growing up as a child, I knew that my family was very religious in the sense that they had a strong moral compass and therefore raised me in that same manner. For the majority of my life, I grew up going to private schools in varying Christian denominations. As well as going to those schools, I guess I was very active in sports, always playing either some form of organized athletics. Another great thing that shaped my childhood was being in Boy Scouts. In the Boy Scouts, I learned many lessons on how to be a responsible person, as well as how to live your life in the correct manner. Throughout my entire life growing up as a child, I knew what was the right and wrong thing to do, whether it was being nice to a person, or listening to your mother and father, not doing drugs, or hanging around with the wrong people and the wrong crowds. All these lessons had been ingrained in me at a very young age. However, once I turned 18, the way that I had been raised as a child would soon change. At the age of 18, I moved out of my home in the middle of my senior year, and that had a huge impact on the following years of my life. I moved out of my home because I started smoking marijuana, and my family was against it, as did most of society. However, I didn't see it as such a big deal, because in California, you could get what was called the medical marijuana card at the age of 18 and be able to legally smoke marijuana. Therefore, I didn't see that there should be some negative stigma upon me smoking marijuana as a drug, so I saw it as somewhat of a loophole legally. Furthermore, everything that I had heard about marijuana, all the bad connotations, weren't really true. After smoking it, I had a radical shift on my perspective in terms of what I had been, told growing up about drugs. Throughout college, I began experimenting with many drugs. Here I had two conflicting narratives going on in my head at once. I had the narratives that were passed on throughout my entire life as a childhood growing up, and that is, drugs are bad, and the people that do drugs or party and drink excessively are the crowd that you should not be around or hang out with. However, this conflicted with the other narrative that I had seen throughout my life. And now that I was in college, that it was time to experiment and find myself. However, in this experimentation, I was led to a path in which I was told my entire life I should not be that person or those people. A huge conflict inside of me emerged. How could hanging around with these people and doing drugs and drinking and partying and having a great time be so bad? I did not understand, so I figured I'm in college, I'll live it up this time. So needless to say, I started experimenting with all kinds of drugs. First with marijuana, edibles, those kind of things, the typical party drugs, and psychedelics. However, slowly but surely over the span of many years, I grew from just experimenting with these substances to them really becoming, 100% reliant on them in order to get through my days. It came to a point that I no longer could find anything else in my life but these drugs, mainly my addiction to prescription pharmaceuticals, Adderall, Xanax, and then cocaine, is what led to the downfall. Needless to say, I could no longer continue my academics or my job at work, so I went into a rehab facility in order to get help. While in my first rehab facility, basically for an addiction to Xanax and cocaine, I then was experienced to a different set of drugs that I had never been, really exposed to. These were primarily harder drugs, like meth and heroin. I figured, hey, I'm in rehab and I'm going to get clean anyway. I might as well just go ahead and try these while I'm here. Upon trying heroin and meth, I soon came to realize that these two drugs were better than anything I've ever tried before. Needless to say, I did not finish that rehab program, and for the next 2 years, I would be constantly in and out of rehab facilities, attempting to get clean. While in and out of these rehab facilities, I came to some realizations. The first realization I came to was that how diverse the problem of drug addiction is, and it was spread throughout our country to all types of people. The second realization I came to believe was that coming in and out of these multiple rehabs, there was also many others like myself that had been returning for multiple visits over and over again, seemingly with no hope in sight for a normal life. The modes of most of these rehab programs, as well as the programs of Alcoholic Anonymous and other anonymous-based 12-step programs or addiction programs, basically tell the person that they can no longer use any drug or substance as a crutch for the rest of their life. This I could not wrap my head around, no matter how many times over and over I was told, if you use a drug, you will become addicted again. And it would just spiral out of control. This didn't make sense to me. I thought about all the different types of addiction there are, from the people that have addiction to eating. So you're going to tell somebody that eats too much that now what, they can never eat again? No, there's a way to manage a person's eating. Or a person that has sex addiction, you're going to tell that person they can never have sex again? No, the person is able to manage and learn and live with their addiction. So in that same sense, that same theory should be applied to any type of addiction, including drugs. Another form of addiction that just came to mind is addiction to shopping. Many people are experiencing shopping addictions, but you have to buy things in order to live in this society. So you can't tell a person they can never shop again for the rest of their life. Here's another example where a person is able to manage or live and control an addiction just because it's not a drug that has a stigma upon it. Finally, by a stroke of luck or divine intervention, I heard about this radical treatment called iboga, which was a hardcore psychedelic hallucinogenic plant root from Africa that would treat your addiction within 24 to 48 hours and had a success rate of about 30% as opposed to traditional rehabs, which come to 7 to 13%. I decided I've tried everything else, and this was the next step and my last and only chance. I figured, why not? I've tried tons of psychedelics before. I've always been the most radical one of my friends to try different things, so let's do it. This substance is highly illegal in the U.S., while you can travel to Canada or Mexico for another treatment called ibogaine or iboga, which is an extract of this plant root. It's not available in America and is labeled a Schedule I drug. So then I had to find an underground treatment facility to get this treatment because I didn't have $10,000 or $5,000 to spend to go to Canada or Mexico to get the treatment, nor could I even get to Mexico or Canada easily. So in order to find this treatment center, basically through divine intervention, I was linked up with an underground medicine circle in Los Angeles. Here, I went to an iboga ceremony, which they no longer do, and was able to recover from my own power back again and be free from my addictions. I was able to have control over the substances now that had been controlling my life for so long. Through the use of this plant medicine, I came to realize that this was the route that I had been looking for, a route to overcome a person's addictions and regain their own personal power. This now leads me into my business plan. It is an iboga/ibogaine rehab facility in the United States. This will basically allow the use of this plant medicine in a more accessible format for people in the United States. This rehab facility would work is that it would be catered specifically to treat patients with an opiate disorder or an addiction with the use of this plant medicine called iboga. In order to do this, somewhat legally in the United States, first an organization would need to be developed. This organization would be a religious organization specifically based upon the Bwiti religion in Africa. In the United States, the use of a sacrament for religious purposes is protected under the Religious Freedoms Act. The use of iboga in West Africa has been used for thousands of years for many different purposes, stretching expansive healing to ceremonial events and for the healing of personal disorders. The primary religion, which is called the Bwiti religion, uses iboga as well as a mix of different Christian beliefs, as well as the Banatu tribe and their traditional teachings in Africa as the three things that make up the Bwiti religion. The iboga plant has been used traditionally as a sacramental basis for many, many generations and thousands of years. After establishing a religious organization, the next steps would then be to establish a patient treatment and intake plan, as well as establish guidelines to follow during an iboga ceremony, as well as an aftercare plan. A brief breakdown of how the business would be able to run and what the cost to operate is as follows. The treatment would be conducted in a leased space. The space would have at least 2 large rooms, a bathroom, and a kitchen or prep area. The 2 main spaces would be the spaces where the ceremonies would be held and where people would come to receive treatment. In order to find a space like this in the LA area, it would cost around $3,000 a month, including utilities. I figured supplies on a monthly basis would be $1,000, basically lights, fruits, vegetables, water, teas, candles, incense, tissues, paper towels, trash bags, cleaning supplies. And then another $1,000 would be given as a donation to helpers and assistants or medical professionals that donated their time. A final cost is the sacrament, which is approximately $100 per person. The operating cost would be a minimum of $6,000 per month, broken down again as $3,000 for the space, $1,000 for supplies, $1,000 for donations to volunteers, and the sacrament being about $1,000. At a donation rate of $500 a ceremony, a total of 12 ceremonies a month would have to be held in order to break even, not accounting any payment for my personal time and investment. As I was once told when first starting a practice, the plant and medicine cannot be your primary source of income. It must be a supplemental income, and you must have another source of income as your primary. However, that being said, at a rate of $500 for a ceremony, that is relatively inexpensive compared to the cost ranging from $5,000 to $10,000 for treatment centers in Mexico. Also, if the treatment centers was to hold ceremonies for more than 12 people, say 20 people a month, then there would be a monthly net profit of around $3,000. This profit is solely based on rendering iboga ceremonies. While I am sure other donations would come from investors, and both previous and past clients would return with donations of gratitude and spread their own story of healing to others, which would be the ultimate gift to give and receive. In order to continue my treatment plan process, I will go to Africa, specifically West Africa, and train under the Bwiti tribe to receive an official sacramental blessing from the shamanic leader of that tribe to serve the medicine in the United States of America. After that, I would then raise my own money and donations to start the church and organization. Finally, why does this really need to happen, and what is the reason for me wanting to do this? The reason is that America is in a huge opioid epidemic at this point in time, and there needs to be more different outlets of alternative medicine that are natural in order to help people overcome their addiction. This was the ability for me. However, due to the outlaw of the medicine and being iboga, making it illegal through the U.S., it makes it difficult for people to receive this type of healing. Therefore, there is a need for iboga to be made legal, or at least be used in a religious ceremony as a guise to heal others. Thank you for listening to my podcast today. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye-bye.